Happy Friday. Welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden, and I really appreciate you being here today. You might have noticed this is a different episode. We're not doing a typical brain scratch or searchlight today. This is something very close to my heart. We're doing an episode called The Uncovered Missing. And what we mean by uncovered is largely in terms of media. So some of you may have noticed on social media, major media, around the Gabby Petito case, there's been a new conversation, a conversation about people of different ethnicities not getting the same type of support or national exposure as Gabby's case. As a matter of fact, the day after she went missing, I was contacted by several families that I had helped before, and they were all asking the same question. What can we do? How can we get this level of help with our cases as well? That sent me down a path of trying to do something to help identify the problem, maybe find some type of tips or helpful information to help these families with these missing loved ones as well. So I've pulled together some interviews that I did with those concerned family members. I've pulled together a team of experts. We're going to put all of this in play today and see if we can come out with something helpful to the missing persons community. The goal is to have an open discussion about these challenges, the factors contributing to them, and hopefully find and share some helpful information for families in similar situations. To do that, I am very privileged and honored to have this group of experts, starting with, in the upper right, Jody Voice Yellowfish, who is chair for MMIW, or Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Texas, and way more than that. Jody, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jody Voice Yellowfish. I'm Muskogee Creek, Oglala, Lakota, and Cherokee. I'm a product of the U.S. government's relocation program. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I attended Haskell Indian Nations University, and I majored in social work. I have a degree in social work, and that kind of led me to understanding more of how to help my community with domestic violence and educate on domestic violence. And I was drawn to helping the crisis that is MMIW, MMIP in our communities, and that led to forming MMIW Texas Rematriate. That's our name now, MMIW Texas Rematriate. And we went from being a source of education and outreach and solidarity and many efforts to actually becoming a resource to helping our community find loved ones, help them navigate that crisis moment when you don't know what to do. Getting flyers together, contacting police, media, things like that. We try to help that process as much as possible. But yeah, all the time we are focused on educating our own community, Native and non-Natives alike. We try to educate as much as possible.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. And in the upper left, we have Dr. Scott Bonn. Doctor, please tell us about your qualifications, experience, history. Let's hear about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today. And my name is Scott Bonn. I'm a criminologist. I'm a college professor and a media commentator. And today's discussion really is in the, right in my bailiwick, because I am really interested in why certain crime stories and why certain individuals become gain huge celebrity status, either infamous or famous. And a lot of that interest of mine comes from my background, because I actually spent the first half of my career in the media world. And so I was very aware and became very aware of why certain stories and how certain stories once again rise to the very top and become spectacles, really. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, and it was really comments of yours that I saw in the Washington Post that initiated me wanting to reach out to you. And I said, I got to get this guy's point of view on this conversation. We're so thankful that you joined us. On the bottom, all on his own down there, Mr. Todd Matthews, someone that I personally feel like is almost a longtime friend at this point, but we had actually never spoken face to face, even virtually before. But Todd, we're so proud to have you here, and please tell the audience about your background and experience.
I don't know where to begin, but I originally started working on a case. It was a case that was a body that was found by my father-in-law in 1968, 2 years before I was born, and she was a Jane Doe case called the Tent Girl because of the condition in which her remains were found, was just wrapped in a canvas tent wrapper. And at 17 years old, that became a mission for me, was to find a way to give her back to her family. 10 years later, almost 11 years later, I did find her family. And it was the first case that the internet was used to solve a case. So the term was first cyber sleuth. And I thought it would be over after that. But here I am at age 51, sitting here with you guys. And, that led to a lot of different things, like the development of Doe Network, which I'm still, operate today. Took a sidebar with NamUs to help develop and actually operate NamUs through its launch period. NamUs was going through several different cycles, the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. It's went to a different entity now for continued maintenance, but there were phases of development, launch, establishment, and then steady flight for a while. And, it's time for me to get back to my life outside of the government so that I can be commentators with my own opinion and not representing somebody in particular. So it's kind of good to get back to home after my tour.
Absolutely. You certainly put your time in and helped many, many families along the way. And I really appreciate you. My hat's off to you. You're like one of my heroes personally. So to have you here on the channel is a huge compliment. Thank you. All right, so I want to start with just a quick round table. I've got a couple of questions here, kind of an open conversation. The first one is, why do certain cases, like Gabby Petito's, grab the public's attention so intensely? Like, we're seeing something here with Gabby's case that I don't know that I've seen for maybe a few years at this point. It might even be bigger than that. This is like, I'm hearing about it from not a few of my friends, all of my friends. I'm hearing about it on media sources that never talk about missing persons cases. How is this grabbing us like this? Want to start us off, Scott, Dr. Bonn?
Yeah, absolutely. This case has what I would say are timely or contemporary aspects to it. It appeals particularly to the TikTok generation and YouTube because Gabby was, part of that generation, and so there is that aspect of it, that appeal. The fact that her journey with her boyfriend was being documented in the social media, this sort of romantic cross-country tour, is it's the making of a movie of the week, really. And then something goes wrong. Something goes very, very wrong, and she goes missing. It has that, definitely those appeals to it. But as a criminologist and trained in sociology, I have to take a step back and look at this really from a societal perspective. And there is something out there that some people think is a theory or a conspiracy, but I'm here to tell you it's very real, and it's called missing white woman syndrome. And this is in that regard, this is not new. This is just a continuation and a perpetuation of stories that become what we call in criminal justice the top of the wedding cake type of cases, the very smallest top tier. And what do those cases tend to have in common when it involves a missing person? They tend to be young, very physically attractive from the society's expectations standpoint, white, female, and not infrequently blonde. Not always blonde, but frequently blonde. And that certainly describes Gabby. So it is in that regard, it is a continuation. I would ask anyone who's watching here today, or even anyone on our panel, to try to remember any missing person case that received this level of attention that did not involve a white female. I don't remember one. I've said to so many news pundits in the last week or so, if this was either an old woman, or if it was a person of color, or if it was a man, or if it was someone who is not physically attractive from society's value standpoint, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. It wouldn't be happening. That's my point of view.
It's a good point. Jody, do you have some thoughts on this? How is this grabbing our attention like this?
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely, I've recently learned of, the white woman, the syndrome, and it makes perfect sense. But what I feel like is kind of missing in that conversation when that's brought up is not that BIPOC communities are like underrepresented, but that, we have to check our history, and we have to look at this, the white supremacy that established this country and the white privilege that goes with that. And that not just are we underrepresented in the media, but white people are overrepresented. And, that makes that normal, that's what we see. That's all the time. I mean, I'm 39 years old, and this is the first time that I've ever seen TV shows with Indigenous people in them. And, that says one thing, and they're not even on TV. You have to stream them, so it's not, if you don't have that access, you still don't see it. So it's that's the reality that we deal with, and that feeds into it as well. And that's something that's not often checked amongst people that have that privilege of not knowing what it feels like to not be seen in the media at all.
Right.
And that's what I feel like is something that's missing when we mention, missing white people in general.
It's a good point. You're highlighting that there's more a systemic issue in it as well. Yeah. Todd, one of the things that I frequently talk to when I'm talking to families of missing persons, and they're asking, like, how do I get this kind of coverage? And one of the things is I've talked about this. I didn't have that name put together of missing white women syndrome, but I just told them cases with attractive, blonde, young, usually blue-eyed, and usually, kind of late teens, early 20s. Like there's almost an age range around it as well. Seems to be the cases that grab the media's attention. Have you noticed that in all your work with missing persons cases as well? Do you have some additional insights on this?
Absolutely. I agree with both of our panelists, both of my co-panelists. These are all real. These are all real things because I worked in the media as director of communications, and usually I'm trying to serve up something a la carte per the request of media. But often I'm trying to pitch stories. Now, I've seen the biggest discretion be between male and female more than any other. There's a local male missing. He's 21 years old. He's dependent on, he has diabetes, so he has to have his medication. Outside of this local area, he's unknown. Locally, we can do all the stories we want. He's missing. Same circumstances, mysterious circumstances, some potential criminal activity, but he's just not seen as a victim. If he was his wife, instead of him, that he went missing, she might be seen more as a victim and more helpless and more in need of help. Traditionally speaking, among the way people think. Now, I'm thinking males and females can be equally powerful in their own right nowadays, but tradition is, you open the door for the female. You yield to that, and I think media kind of does the same thing. They open the door for this one first, and honestly, if they're attractive, yes, that gets an attention. You're changing channels and you see something, and even rich versus poor. Now, I can buy media if I want to. Now, if the mayor goes missing, and our mayor here in our town is African American, very low minority rate here, but he's the mayor. If he goes missing, it's going to be probably on CNN.
Right.
Now, my next door neighbor is retired. He could be missing for how long before anybody would even know it, because he's not checking in. He's not punching a clock. He's not responsible for anything. He's not being held accountable for anything. He can do whatever he wants. And in an attempt to try to leave him alone and let him live his life, he could technically be missing and completely skeletalized before we would even know that he was missing. So there's a lot of things into play, but I've never seen anybody reject a case I've never had, and I've been interviewed well over 1,000 times. I've never had anybody just say, no, that person's not attractive, or no, this, no, that. I think it's just the appeal of what they see immediately. And I have steered people. But now to think about the case with Gabby, even though it was a little troublesome, because why can't I get you the media interest that this person has? And I'm dealing with that real time like you are.
Yeah.
Think about the benefit that even getting all these eyes, it's allowing us to have this conversation today.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. So just like, you know what? Let's make lemonade. If we feel like that we've not got enough, latch on to it and take that opportunity to see. And there were other cases. There was at least one other case solved because of her case, because the extra, and that was a male. So that's a good thing. So I think take what you can get and try to change it in baby steps. If we just try to throw out something like, these are the new guidelines, I think we're going to get some pushback. But every time I see something like this, I try to baby step it. Yeah. And I can say, actually, there's more missing men than women.
Right.
And so I get that little dig in the media with that. So, and those people will come back. I recently did an interview with CBC that was 5 years in the making, because little commentary back and forth. And now we're back. And, so take the opportunities, and instead of taking them apart, maybe build on them.
I like that. And it's perfect for where we're going to go next, because now I want to talk about what's working right in Gabby's case. Because even when I started hearing about people that were asking me about this, John, how do we get this level of coverage? I was very clear of the feeling within myself that what we're seeing happening in Gabby's case is what should be happening in all these other cases. Level of exposure raised, which means more eyes on law enforcement's efforts. All of a sudden, they have more of a responsibility to keep reporting on things and to keep the public updated. The public, through that, is now empowered. There's more people that know who to be looking for or what details to be looking for. And this case is a perfect example of that working great. How many different pieces of this story do we now have from people that are, oh, I gave him a ride in this direction. Oh, I gave Brian a ride in that direction. I remember seeing them at a restaurant. All this stuff is coming together because of the media exposure. It's like this triangle of, the regular people, media, and law enforcement, and the circle just having this bright spotlight on it. Dr. Bonn, what's working right in Gabby's case?
Well, I'm going to have to agree with very much with Todd that this is a learning opportunity. And personally, I've been writing about the underrepresentation for some time in these cases, but only now have I really had the opportunity to discuss it openly in a forum. I was invited on the Today Show last week to have this discussion. Was very happy, and once again, I'm so grateful for the invitation today. It is an opportunity to educate and let the world know. Guess what? There are more missing men than women, as Todd said. And according to the FBI statistics, more than 70% of all missing of all missing persons in 2020 were not white women, more than 70%. And those are reported cases. Now imagine even the cases that go unreported, because I think that we can make a pretty good argument that particularly in poorer communities and in certain communities of color, that probably more cases go unreported. So I would suggest that 71% is probably even considerably higher. Yeah. It is important to talk about this. And I really like the way Todd says, let's look at this from a positive angle and use it as an educational opportunity.
Absolutely. Jody, what's working right with this case?
Yeah, I feel like something that is right with this case is the conversations and the focus that goes along with the abuse that she was facing. Within that relationship, that's something that within a lot of MMIW and MMIP groups, we deal with a lot more than just somebody missing. Our communities don't have the resources to deal with and heal from abusive relationships. And domestic violence. And I think that's something that's actually being looked upon. People are dissecting what's happened between Gabby and her partner, in that all these signs were shown. You know, there were signs where they were fighting. There were signs where this happened and this happened. And I think that's one thing that's gone right, is the conversation around that and what kind of led to this very dangerous situation they kept themselves in. I think that's something that has gone right with this. But, and also, you know, I would like to add to what was mentioned was like, yeah, we do have a lot of men missing, and which is why, you know, with MMIW, it has grown into MMIP to include all of our relatives and not just to focus on women, because we do face this, you know, it's a across the board type of thing where all men are ignored in this. You know, they're not viewed as somebody that can be taken so easily. They're supposed to be, you know, the tougher, you know, stronger. These things don't happen to them, and that's definitely something that has really increased in the past, I say like 2 to 3 years within even the Indigenous communities.
Yeah. I think you made a really good point about the domestic violence component. And we know that the police department in Moab is now analyzing their interactions thoroughly, forward and backward, with what happened around that. But I think it's also interesting to point out, you've got that YouTube video of this almost fantasy life that was kind of put out there a matter of weeks before this all happened. And it's just such an important warning, I think, for all of us to remember to check in with our loved ones despite the shiny exterior, and just always make sure that they're okay. We're going to roll into one of our first featured cases here. But Jody, what's your impression of national media coverage specifically regarding MMIW or MMIP cases, and the challenges around those cases getting national coverage?
Yeah, I think, you know, some of the challenges are, you know, when we were mentioning, you know, the missing white woman syndrome, you know, that's directly affected to that person's identity and demographics of who they are, where they're from, things like that. And, you know, that could never be something that communities of color really deal with, because we don't have that more wholesome tie to our background, you know, or who we are. You know, there's a lot of victim blaming and shaming that happens to people of color. And, you know, that's something that is a very historic thing. I mean, we've been dealing with this type of violence, gender-based violence, and, you know, and things since, you know, colonization started, since this country was founded. That's how it was founded, on violence, and that violence never stopped. And that's our everyday reality. And we have to, you know, with that violence came, you know, that historic violence has skewed our present day view of us. Yeah. You know, in the fact that there's this disposability factor that goes along with that violence. You know, these things were norm, were the norm, and it's still there. That's just something that we can't shake, and that disposability factor doesn't help our want or the interest in a case. You know, we can't even get proper interest from law enforcement, let alone media. Yeah. You know, we have we deal with jurisdiction issues and no communication, lack of communication on reservations, and even with poor communities in urban areas, we don't have all the connections to stay connected. We don't always have cell phone and Wi-Fi and things like that. You know, there's just this lack there that feeds directly into interest and overall care of how cases are treated for communities of color.
Yeah.
Could I jump in for a second?
Please.
I couldn't agree more with what Jody just said. And, you know, again, as a sociologist, I got to step back and you know, the media is a reflection of society. Okay, so they're simply picking up on the cases that they think will appeal most, you know, to society. But what Jody's referring to is what I would even call the hyper-sexualization of women of color. Oftentimes, you know, the white white girl is the virginal girl. She is the innocent, the little lamb that needs to be protected. But the woman of color is the more, sexual, provocative one, and she's not really quite the same victim. These are stereotypes. These are just so ingrained in our society that naturally, when it comes to media coverage and the way the news frames things, they're going to pick up on those stereotypes. They're going to perpetuate those stereotypes. So this is an institutionalized thing. It's a systemic kind of thing, and it's not a new systemic thing. We're talking about 150 years of media portrayals. So I think it's important to remember that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me wonder about, is media really being a leader in terms of guiding us, or are they just following the impulses and feeding into what's already pre-existing there?
In my experience, and as having worked in the media for 20 years, I would say they're much more of a follower, because there's a fear factor there. You don't want to alienate the audience because you got to bring in advertisers, right? So we don't want to frighten those advertisers. So we're going to be pretty status quo in the terms of the way we view things.
Absolutely. I spoke to a woman who has walked over 100 miles across desert in the Arizona heat, over 100 degrees we're talking about. And that helped raise some attention to her missing aunt's case. Now, in this clip, you're going to hear her refer to the president, and she's talking about Jonathan Nez, the current president of the Navajo Nation. Let's go ahead and hear our first story here.
My name is Seraphine Warren, and Mae Begay is my aunt, and she is Navajo, and we are both Navajo.
And when and where did Mae go missing?
She is originally born and raised in Sweetwater, Arizona, and she went missing from her home that is 5 miles east of the Sweetwater chapter. Okay. And it was on June 15th, and it was like at 2:30 in the morning is what her youngest daughter was saying.
Okay. And how would you describe the level of support that you've gotten from media? And I know there's differences, we've got major media and social media, but if you could just explain to us, how do you feel in terms of the support from them?
Social media was very helpful. They were more supportive. And then as far as like newspapers or national news, I didn't get anything until Gabby went missing. I think that's when they started buzzing around. People did reach out to me to contact like the national news, like Fox or the news that are in the area. And I did try most of them. And then I think I went and did a walk last week to the state capitol, and they did a prayer run. And that's when I met with the senator in Salt Lake. I don't know if that had anything to do with them contacting me, but that's when they started contacting my sisters, my family, that they wanted to share my story after. That was after Gabby.
Yeah. But it also it was like a combination of the highlight from Gabby's case on these lesser known cases, but also because you had done a lot of footwork in terms of trying to raise exposure yourself. You mentioned live streaming on Facebook and your walks. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about what motivated you to get the walks started, and how have those been working for you with gaining media's attention?
Well, I would say that when my aunt went missing, we had the newspapers of the Navajo Nation that were out here covering her story, and they wanted an interview, and they did interview myself, the daughter, and my the oldest son of Mae. And that's when we told them our story, and they did do a story at that time. And that was just like the first 2 weeks, and then it went out, and then it went quiet. Like when the police department stopped searching, they went along with them too, and it was just like we weren't guided. I just felt like they must have dealt with a lot of missing cases, so I thought that they knew what they were doing as far as investigation and what the police department is supposed to offer. And I was excited because I really did think we were going to find my aunt that first day or even sooner. So it went into the next week, and we were told to stop searching the second week. I wasn't sure, and that was from the FBI. They told me to focus on my family and to stop searching. It didn't sit well with us, but we still continued to search without letting public know that we were searching. I felt sorry for my siblings because it was my siblings that were out there, and there was like 15 of us, including my uncle's kids. And at every end of the day, we didn't find her, and it was just getting harder to believe in our prayers or just what we were doing. And one day, I was done. It was my breaking point. I usually drive with my brother, LMA's oldest son, and I try not to cry near him because he's trying to be strong for just himself. His sisters were there. One is on the street doing drugs, and the other one is an alcoholic, and he only has 2 siblings. And I knew he depended on us to help him out. And so that was the first time he see me cry. I said, no, I don't know what's going on. I don't think the police are going to help us find her. We have to do something. And as I'm going to walk to the Capitol and ask the president, where's my aunt? He's like, I'm scared for you. It's not safe out there. You can't walk. And I said, that's the whole point. Like, I'm going to prove a lot of points as far as how the police don't even help us. And there's going to be a female walking on the road, and they're not even going to stop and try to ask us what's going on, even though there are going to be people that are going to be talking about what I'm doing. And so July 19th, I started walking at 2:30 in the morning just because that's when my aunt went missing. And I went live just crying and asking for help up to noon. I walked by myself, and then there was a veteran that met me at the Arizona state line between New Mexico and Arizona. That's where a TV media met me, and they did air my story that time. I ended my walk at 7:00 that evening, and it was Monday, I think it was. And I've seen 2 police officers that just zoomed past by, didn't even stop for water, but a lot of the community did stop, and they did appreciate what I was doing, and that they knew the law enforcement wasn't going to do nothing, and that I needed to continue to go and tell the president what was going on with our law enforcement and why they just left us like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of that community support. I got to the end of my walk in an hour. I laid down, and somebody tagged me in a video that the police department, Navajo Police Department, what is he? Not the chief of police, the captain. He updated the whole public instead of coming to our family and sitting down and ask, like, what's going on? Like, what's the problem? Or just update us. But he updated the whole public an hour after I stopped walking, and he could have done that while I was walking. And that's all I was asking for, was to be recognized that what are we going to do next? And
so it sounds like your original intent wasn't even really to get media coverage. You were just doing this walk as an emotional reaction. But do you know that first news crew that found you, how did they hear about this?
So when I was doing my live, I did get a lot of tags on my live, and they were tagging news reporters, they were tagging the president, they were tagging just people that should hear my story. And I didn't know until one of my cousin's sisters, she's like, well, where are you at? Because there's this person that wants to interview you. Wait for them. They're already waiting at the state line for you. So that's where I met that crew, news crew. I don't remember what news crew it was, but
okay. And I know you've reached out to a lot of different companies, trying to get help on this. Have you ever heard of any reasons or excuses from them about why you're not getting coverage or why it's more limited in your aunt's case?
They didn't really give me a lot of information, but we just know that we're blanketed with jurisdiction and sovereignty stuff that prevents us from not a lot of information being allowed to be given out to other like outside of our Navajo Nation. I feel like that's the main problem was that, because that when I asked about the Gabby. Well, I wasn't upset about. I'm very happy that they found her, but I just wanted to know how they did theirs and how they had all those guys to help them out and find her really quick. And the more it's going longer into our case, it seems like it was the funding is what they were saying, that they couldn't continue to search because there's not enough money in our police department right now. They're sitting in an old post office. Okay. And it doesn't, it's just embarrassing. That's why I also went over there to the police department and addressed it that, you know what, you guys need to get updated with the technologies, with all of this stuff. When I was walking, I did meet a lot of families with missing loved ones, and their story is exactly the same as mine. And they're like, they're only going to be there for 2 weeks. We were already told that. But then I still had hope, because when my aunt went missing, they said that they had a MMIW task force, and I was like, oh, yeah, they're gonna find my aunt. And I never met who was behind the task force. I didn't know, I know about the MMIW organizations, and there's a lot in different states, and I never knew that we had one here on the Navajo Nation, and that was really new to a lot of these people, that they're like, what? I mean, how come we're left out? Because even a lot of these people were like, I don't think we have something like that. And so when they brought it up, when my aunt went missing, I was thinking, like, yeah, they're going to find her. And I even gave hope to my family members that they're going to find her. Don't worry. They have a new task force. And I don't know what that was. I don't even know what it entails. I don't even know what it is. I guess the president's wife was the person that was appointed to start that task force. And I never met her. I haven't even talked to her. I haven't even made contact with the lady. Her husband came out, the president, but she wasn't there. I just don't understand why she's not involved. Yeah. If she's the one that created this group.
For the people out there that maybe didn't know about the plight that MMIW has had, that there's so many of these cases, that they're so severely underreported, for those new people out there listening now, do you have any message for them?
That we all need to work together and continue to look out for each other.
Jody, I'm sure you have a lot of feelings and insight about what's going on with this case. Can you talk a bit about those and the challenges with raising exposure to these cases?
Yeah, definitely. So a few things that stood out to me from what everything she shared with, and this case has been around all summer basically, and everyone in Indian country and all the MMIW groups across the country, we all know what's going on in that case, and we know what Ella is a national treasure to their nation. She's a master weaver. You could see pictures of her weaving in that photo that was on the screen the entire time, and it hurts to know that she's an elder. That's something too that was different for even all of us that do MMIW work. To search for an elder, it's just a different pain for that entire, not only their family but their community. And it's how she mentioned too, she just happened to decide to go live on Facebook, and that is something too that is very, very native in Indian country, is the use of Facebook. Mm-hmm. Not just social media, but Facebook is used constantly for every MMIW, MMIP case. It's hard for our people to even get safe flyers put out. Part of our education is how to do this safely to keep the rest of the family safe. A lot of people go straight to their Facebook and will post a picture and a phone number. And that's the first thing we tell people not to do. It's a part of what we do every time we can get cussed out by families, how, I'm going to do this and that. And we're like, Okay, but then now the cops are going to get annoyed that they're having to vet all of these fake ransom and fake, tips and things like that. That's a part of the education that a lot of our people do not have. People know about the crisis that is MMIW, but they don't know what the work entails. And she referred to the task force. So there is a national task force that was put out into the world under the Trump administration, and it hasn't done anything at all. I've participated in some of their virtual discussions, their hearing sessions where, it's just another thing that community of colors deal with. We get the task force to deal with homelessness. We get the task force to deal with, police brutality, and in our case with our missing and murdered Indigenous women, and nothing has come of it. So I get the frustration. We all deal with that frustration because it's still a task force that is active. And I say that active because we don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be one in every state. We don't know how that works. I've participated in the listening sessions where if you don't have great Wi-Fi and great connections, it's not going to work for you. And that's what Native people deal with. We have crappy signals everywhere because we're out in the middle of nowhere. We have no infrastructure. I mean, Navajo Nation barely has running water, let alone great Wi-Fi signal and connection to stay in communication. These are just some of the obstacles that communities like Ella's deal with. She mentioned, the lack of funding. We get told these things all the time. I live in a city and still get told these things. One of our first obstacles that we usually deal with when, creating flyers and such to share, to start to get the word out about our missing relatives is, we can't put anything out there in the media until we have a case number. You have to have a case number on your flyers to get any law enforcement support. Well, one of the biggest obstacles is that underage or not, even adults, everyone gets labeled a runaway. And when you get labeled a runaway, you don't get any help because it's by choice. You leave by choice. You're an adult and you leave. Doesn't matter. Nobody can do anything for you. That's what we deal with. I think that is one of our biggest obstacles, that getting labeled a runaway should not be a death sentence. And it oftentimes is, because we get no support whatsoever when they're labeled a runaway. I mean, in the state of Texas, you can get status offenses, and you run away, you end up in juvie. But nobody's asking the question why these people are running away. What are they running away from? Are they leaving domestic violence situations? Are they in a foster home where they're being abused? Why are these people leaving? That is our biggest thing. When you get labeled a runaway, you don't get a case number like you need to make a flyer, to get media attention, to get it out in your community. And which is why, Ella's family was told to quit searching. These families don't quit searching.
Yeah.
I've seen families put up their houses that have been in their families for ages, for money to get, to do searches, to do on the ground searches. And, that's something that this task force doesn't really do. It's not any boots on the ground type of work that these families need. That just lack of overall support on all these different levels is like huge when it comes to these cases. It breaks people searching for their loved ones, and it's sad to see this happening with an elder, especially.
That categorization of runaway, that is so problematic. And we hear about a lot of pushback when people go to report missing persons cases, and the law enforcement will basically tell them, no, we're not going to take the report right now because they're going to be back tomorrow, or they just ran off on their own, or they're being teenagers or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, some of these missing persons cases, and Todd, I don't know if maybe you know stats on this, they wind up actually being homicides. They're uncategorized homicides in a lot of cases as well. Todd, can you speak to some of the statistics or information that you might have about these types of outcomes on cases like this?
Well, a great deal of our unidentified remains, which is what I was more familiar with, a great deal are considered homicide. And, they were missing from somewhere, whether we know who they are or not yet, they're dead.
Yeah.
And they're a victim of crime. So those statistics are loud and clear. You can look online. We don't usually on NamUs, they don't list the cause and manner of death usually, but usually the accompanying newspaper articles will say that. There's just not a public category in NamUs. That doesn't mean it's been withheld. There's just not a place to display it. But I look at the newspaper articles, homicide victim, blunt force trauma, burned alive in a car. There's so many different things, and people don't bury themselves in a shallow grave.
Right.
Somebody put them there. So you see so much of that it's not good out there. What you're facing, you're out there. And then to tell a family they'll be back, that is so stressful to have to go home and think about it. Knowing the person well. Everybody says my person wouldn't do that. But if my dad was to go missing right now, responsible 73-year-old man, there's a reason why he's not coming back.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Now, law enforcement might give me a different story at the time, like, well, it's not been long enough to consider him truly missing. So, and that's frustrating for the families. And sometimes I see the families not going back to law enforcement to finalize a report because they think they've been told no. So I think it's up to the family to keep going back. And we face some similar conditions this in rural Tennessee. We have a blonde hair, blue-eyed young girl. She walked away. She was last seen walking away. She has no national media attention, barely any local attention, because the perception was she walked away. But from what? Right. I don't know what, right. So we're not even getting to the root of the problem. But why did she walk away? But we're in rural America. I think the rural Americans face some of the same problems as racial. I think we do.
Yeah.
If you're not affluent and we're cut off in isolated areas too, very often in areas where there's not good communication, or the families just don't have the skills to try to go back and hit that wall again and again and again until they put a crack in it. I see so often somebody, why didn't you go back and do this? Well, they told me I could. When did they tell you that? 3 years ago. So you didn't try again?
Yeah.
And I think it's support, and I appreciate MMIW turning in MMIP. I think that was amazing. That just makes me feel so much better. But I think, again, as Jody said, we all have to work together as people and do everything that we can to make sure we share the resources with each other. There's resources out there. We just have to find the right people and get them on board.
Yeah.
And the media just picks up for the strangest of reasons. With her case in particular, she was already very well documented in what she was, what she was working on at the time. So the media had a lot to latch on to.
Right.
In some cases, they have nothing but just a story that families are trying to tell. So there's a lot here. We could do this for 6 days and not get done.
Yeah. Now, Seraphine also believed that the sovereignty and treaties were somehow limiting factors in terms of how her case was being handled and exposed. And Todd, I know NamUs actually has some categorizations for, did the disappearance happen on tribal land, or does the person live on tribal land? Can you explain why those categorizations are there, or what they do in terms of the program?
So for the very things that Jody mentioned, jurisdictional issues, there's special steps that have to be taken. If you're getting medical records, you might have to go through a federal entity instead of the neighborhood dentist. There are so many different things, and it lays out the land for where do we start with this? So even just internally knowing if it was on tribal land or if it's a tribal law enforcement agency, it wasn't to give favor or take away favor. It's just situational awareness. What are the resources that are available? What NGOs can we reach out to and partner with and strengthen, or they could strengthen our effort? It just gave us a good landing point as to where are we at with this and where do we go next.
Excellent. Dr. Bonn, I wanted to see if you could give us some insights on the challenge that media might have with covering a case of this nature. Now, we're talking about an elder. We're talking about someone known throughout her community for her beautiful artwork, and I've seen several examples of it myself. Why isn't that on Dateline or hitting some national level?
Well, it's a fantastic question, and it's such a tragedy. I mean, hearing the story and then hearing Jody so eloquently, describe the context in which this is happening. It's just, it's as a human being, it's forget any expertise. Just as a human being, it's heartbreaking, and all too often. I mean, I hate to sound jaded here, and I hate to sound like I don't think that that we need to try to break through this wall, like Todd was saying, because we do. But the problem is that a woman like this in her community, an elder, a very revered, loved individual, to much of U.S. society is the other. This is someone that I can't necessarily relate to. It's not like my next door neighbor Bobby that I go bowling with on Tuesday nights, or we have the barbecue on Saturday afternoons. It's something exotic and different. So to the major networks, to the Datelines, the 2020s, and the 48 Hours, they're going to scratch their heads and they're going to say, how big a group is this going to appeal to? Rather than looking at it the other way and saying, here's an opportunity to educate, here's a real human interest story that the world needs to hear about, they look at the commodification of it and how much is this going to resonate with the general audience out there. And I have, not to go on a different tangent, but there's another major problem out in our society right now, and it's called suicide, and it's growing and growing and growing. And this is another issue that I have been taking to the major networks for some time. They don't want to talk about it. That's depressing. That's just depressing. We don't want to talk about that. Well, forget the fact that it's taking more lives than automobile accidents and cigarettes and everything else combined every year. But that's too depressing. Well, it's the same kind of deafness, empathetic deafness that we're encountering here, with these stories. And it's a shame. It's more than a shame. It's tragic, is what it is.
Yeah.
And the media is a business, and the public needs to remember that they are not necessarily obligated to cover or not cover anything. They're going to cover, and it's legitimate. It's their business that they're going to cover what they're getting the demographics for, no doubt about it. So maybe we change the demographics, and I've done a lot of work over the years to try to find ways to make these cases more appealing to media so that they'd say, here's why you should cover it. Because I got to remember that reporter's got to do a pitch to a producer.
Yeah, I wanted to add just to what Scott mentioned about, because it's other, that othering of a group of people, and how Todd mentioned too, poor, just anyone that's poor, we have poor white people, poor Black people, everyone that's poor. They're the ones that walk. They're the ones that have to walk at night, and when the major demographics are going to be like, they can't relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Navajo Nation, everyone walks.
Yeah.
There's no infrastructure to travel safely. They walk miles and miles on the highway, on the interstate. 2-lane interstates that go through the state are completely dangerous any time of the day or night. That's something that people can't connect to. That other, it's not palatable, right. for the country, to want, like they did with Gabby's case. Everything about Gabby was palatable. Everything about her was something that people can relate to. And that's the sad, reality that we face. If you're poor, if you're from somewhere that doesn't have those means, then you're just kind of out of luck, and you fight.
Right.
You make a great point about it being palatable. Like, if there is this aspect, because yes, true crime has this popularity factor that's been going on. And a part of that is people want to be Todd Matthews. People want to be the one that actually helps solve a case. Who doesn't think they know what happened in this case? Like, it looks like it's one of the most straightforward, easy to understand types of cases. So I think, to your point, media looks at this and they just go, this is an easy sell. Like, this is something everyone thinks that they're going to understand forward and backward.
Production-wise, it had all the elements that you would need for a story that you could take nationwide. It is.
Yeah.
Had everything. And I'm having a hard sell with 2 of the local cases, and I know these people personally, and I work nationwide, and I'm having a hard sell because these are poor, unknown people. And literally 15 years ago, there was a missing person in a very rural community. Wasn't always the most savory person, wasn't a bad person. And I had an officer tell me, trash takes care of trash. Mm. Now think of that. Now, how do you tell it? What do? You go back and tell the family that?
No.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, Seraphine found support via her Facebook Lives that seemed to feed into local media coverage. That local coverage led to social media and people like me paying attention and echoing the story. Seems like it's almost like trying to get a fire started, like you're starting with the twigs and leaves and just trying to build up from there. But what about a case that predates social media? How did this family take the story all the way to Unsolved Mysteries and the ID Network, but still, to this day, can't get it on the national news?
My name is Michelle McCown Luster. I am sister to missing Niqui McCown, an African-American woman from Richmond, Indiana.
And when and where did Niqui go missing?
She went missing July 22nd, 2001 in Richmond, Indiana at a laundromat.
Wow. So you're dealing with this for over 20 years at this point.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a long stretch. And for the families that we're talking to, some have had kind of more or less success in terms of media and grabbing their attention and trying to get their help with this case. How do you feel that you guys have done with support from media around this?
Local media, I would have to say, have been very supportive. National media, not so much, as we've been doing this for 20 years. You see all this behind me. This is all the stuff that we've done work through in the last 20 years to try to get some focus on Niqui's case. She has been on a couple of national channels and but no national news networks. You get to the stage where you're like, what's the purpose? I mean, nothing's gonna come of this because nobody's trying to help. I feel like I'm screaming and no one can hear me or no one's listening. And then, like as for Niqui's case, when she first came up missing, it took the local police 2 to 3 weeks before they had us out searching in fields behind her house and stuff. And when you see someone like Gabby get found within 2 weeks, it kind of makes you think like, why isn't my loved one important enough to be, for the local police to use all the resources to find them? What makes this missing person case different than the one that we're dealing with? And you could only come to a couple different things, and I can't help but it's standing out right in my face. It's the color of her skin. And I think it also has to do with how much money you make and how much money you have behind you to help push this kind of stuff. Because I've talked to a lot of Caucasian people that feel like their voices weren't heard. And they weren't well off people. So they felt the same as I did, but Niqui has the same thing with we're not well off and she's a person of color.
Right. What's your impression right now of coverage when it comes to the African American community and missing persons cases and support? Are there groups out there that are trying to support these cases? Are you finding anything like that?
See, Niqui's been missing 20 years. So we got 20 years behind us. But I have, in the 20 years that we've been searching for Niqui, I have found a lot of nonprofits that are there to help. One is called We Help the Missing. I actually volunteer with that group, and I've sent them a few different cases where they got right on top of it and, try to help the families out. So there are nonprofits out there that can help. It's just about how much time the family has to put into something like that, because I'm not gonna lie, it's like a job because I've dedicated my life to this, and It's tiresome. You got to stay focused. It does get frustrating, but you just can never give up, because the one time you give up is like giving into the person or the people that are responsible for them being missing.
Wow. That's a really strong statement. And I totally agree. I'd never thought about it from that perspective before. Yeah. And you don't want to let them win, right? Essentially,
No.
you keep up this search for justice.
Mm-hmm.
One of the highlights in terms of national exposure for Niqui's case is, I believe it's an episode of Disappeared, right? Do you know how that came together? Did they contact you? Did you guys reach out to them?
Everything that you see Niqui on, whether it be Unsolved Mysteries, Disappeared, Crime Watch Daily, all, Montel Williams, the family contacted them.
Okay.
And I think one thing that sold Niqui's stories to those, agencies is the fact that she was about to be married. And not only was she about to be married, she worked in a prison and she was a mother. And I think that when you look at big time news stations and networks, they want a story. It's not about the person. It's about a story to them. See, like for me, I'm searching for an answer. It's someone I love. It's not just a story. And not enough is being done to search for Niqui. I mean, you have 5 different agencies looking for this one young lady.
Right.
Which is all we all want as a family member of a missing person. That's all we want. But for this particular case, they all came together and they worked together and they got it done within 2 weeks. My family has waited 20 years. 20 years of not knowing. Gabby's family had to go 2 weeks without knowing. I can only imagine what her mother was feeling, because I've seen that look on my own mother's face.
Yeah.
So there's nothing against their family, because my heart pours out to them because I know what they're feeling. But why don't women and men that look like Niqui get the same attention? Why don't they matter? I'm not here to bash the police, because they still have my sister's case open, and I appreciate that. And they said that they're still looking, and I hope that's the case.
Yeah.
But a detective can only do so much. They have to have the information, and that's where I go to the public. And someone had to have seen something. They had to see her either leave that laundromat, or her vehicle was found in Dayton, Ohio. Someone's seen that vehicle be parked there by Niqui or someone else. Someone's seen something. And for whatever reason, they haven't came forth. And that makes the police's work even harder.
There's a lot of people that are now becoming aware of this, maybe that didn't realize that this was going on before, that there's so many missing persons cases that are just severely underreported. For people that are new to this conversation, what do you want them to know and understand about this?
There are so many missing people in the United States alone, and 40% of those are people of color. Now, unfortunately, if a person of color comes up missing, it seems that you file a missing persons report, and then that's it. I hope everybody that's a person of color or just a person missing in general, after you file that missing persons report, stay in contact with your police, the detective working on the case. If you have to call them every week, stay on top of it. And then also contact some nonprofits. There's agencies out here that have the way to get a private investigator, someone just focusing on your loved one's case, they have ways to go search and do things like that you can't get your local officers to do. So, I say contact nonprofits, stay on top of the police, call them every week. There's for a while, we was calling them every day. And just never give up hope. Keep fighting. The minute you stop, you're letting that person that took your loved one away, whether it be one or many people that took your loved one away, you're allowing them to win. If social media had been around when Niqui first came up missing, I believe we'd be in a different position. I believe that's one of the biggest tools that agency can use, because you can get that flyer out to so many people in a matter of just sharing. If we just all share flyers, then that would help out.
Yeah. One last question for you, Michelle. What do you want the world to know about Niqui?
When you look at Niqui's flyer, and there's one particular where she's smiling, that big old smile, a beautiful smile. That's what I see when I wake up and when I go to bed. It's that smile that makes me want to look hard. And then I look over at her daughter and she has that same smile.
Michelle gave a lot of good tips about the basics of trying to help these cases. Todd, I know that you've helped many families in these situations. Do they ever ask you for advice about getting news coverage, and what do you tell them?
They do. And often, anniversary dates are important. As much as you can tell them about the story, because they do want a story. They don't want just a flyer. They want a story that can be told and can be unfolded. So being very descriptive about that person and the good things about that person. Some of the things that they were choosing to do later in life, some of the things that they loved, and it's important. Showing the world what was taken from it, I think, is really, really important. And, now with social media, it's the great equalizer. You can have something out there in a split second, just like she said. You don't need for somebody else to do it for you. You have the power to do it. And to take that power and do it is one thing that's really important. So I hope to see more people using the opportunity that they have. And in cases that go into NamUs in particular, this is a good point. You don't always have to make that phone call, because I have law enforcement that won't, we get the call, we're going to get the call every day, and it's uncomfortable. And we're going to have to tell them we don't know anything else other than what we knew yesterday or a week ago. But if you have your case in NamUs, NamUs has case matching behind the scenes. It can proactively compare missing from any jurisdiction, any part of the United States, to unidentified in any jurisdiction, any part of the United States. It can flag it as a possibility. And somebody else, if you have a missing person, somebody else could have an unidentified body that they could exclude. And then there's going to be an exclusion noted in your file. And you could actually tell the family, well, actually, not that it was a hot tip, but there were remains found similar in 300 miles away. The dental records were compared and it wasn't a match. But knowing that something's being done, whether they're able to do it or not, this is where I feel like law enforcement should make sure not that dental DNA and fingerprints are available, but they're uploaded into NamUs and they're readily available to be compared by somebody on the other side. And if they're not there, believe me, if it's in your drawer, it's of no use. It is not readily available. It's available, but not readily available. If you know the name of the dentist, that's not readily available. So I think that's the family's fight here too, is to make sure, did you have the dental records? I brought them to you. Are they uploaded in NamUs? They're still in a drawer? No. Are they uploaded into NamUs? I want them in NamUs, readily available for proactive comparison so that I know something's been done. Don't stop until you get that done. We deal with this every day. Laying on the desk does nobody any good.
Well, and a lot of people don't have to worry about that anymore because of work that you've also done to pass bills in certain states to make sure that this entry is mandatory, that it's actually mandated for law enforcement.
Well, and to go back and have to amend it, I originally was working in New York, and then Tennessee came in as the first. Tennessee was the second for missing persons, but the first that did missing and unidentified must go into name us in a certain amount of time. But that didn't necessarily have any teeth to it. So if the case goes in, whether it's by the family or whoever, at least it brought about training within law enforcement, because it's a state law. Now we have to say the word, name us.
Yeah.
So it was a seed. Now, will it grow? We have to still water it. So I went back to state officials and I asked for a proclamation, which was passed this year, which encourages medical providers to stand up, because I do lectures in front of Dental Hygienists Association all the time. Nobody would ever refuse it. But to the medical community, whether it's prosthetics, whatever, dental, if you have records and you know of a person that's missing, that's your client, would you submit those records, no matter how irrelevant they seem? Yes, of course. Would you proactively? And that's where it is. Well, it's a HIPAA. No, it's not. It's not a HIPAA violation if there's a long-term missing person and you gave them a hip replacement. It's not a HIPAA violation to let law enforcement know that person was a patient of mine. If there's anything that I could do, I have records. I feel like law enforcement will take those records quicker when you slide them halfway across the table. So to encourage the medical community, well, it started conversations. It planted a seed, but I still have to water it. It was a recommendation for the medical community. And I don't want them to tell me they're too big because that's their patient. I don't want them to, we're too busy to take care of that. No, you're not. There's your patient and you vowed for their care. And this could be the next part of it. You are not too busy. There are people. If you have a missing person in your own family, you'll find out you ain't too busy for nothing.
Yeah.
Until that happens to you. So that's where we have to come together as community professionals. You've paid that care provider to take care of you at some point. For them to, it's not public display of information. It's making sure that that implant with that serial number on it is in the national database.
Yeah.
And the rest of us can take care. It's a pull and push. So, and I won't do that in other states. It's mostly symbolic. It doesn't make anybody do anything, but it makes you think.
Yeah.
It makes you think. And I mentioned that when we do newspaper articles about a missing person. By the way, proclamation, whatever here in Tennessee requires this. So then that word gets out there and that puts a little more pressure on the situation. And it's, like I say, it's good trouble. It's trouble, but it's good trouble. Did it step on some toes? Yeah, it kind of did. But sometimes we have to.
Yeah.
I stepped, I didn't stomp.
Right. I love your approach, Todd. I just got to say it. I love your approach. Dr. Bonn, there's a quote that Michelle said in that clip. It's someone I love. It's not just a story. Is the aspect of turning these cases into these easily digestible story elements, is that coming from the expectation of viewers? Is it coming from the news producers? Is it the pressure from the advertisers? Is there one particular aspect that's more responsible?
I think it's all part of a system. It's interlinked. There's not just one. If we're looking for the bad guy who's responsible for all this, we're not going to find that individual or single component. Unfortunately, what we're dealing with is a very homogenized society. And having worked in the media myself, and Todd, mentioned this earlier, looking for what is going to appeal to the mass number of eyeballs, the most possible eyeballs. And those are, very simple but compelling stories. So the story, I think it is very true that regardless of the demographics and regardless of this, this issue of people of color being underrepresented, if you want to get to the heart, get exposure, then the more compelling the story is, the more we can relate to the person in terms of, like Todd said, their aspirations, their goals, their life. That's really, really important. But is that enough? Is that enough to overcome some of these preconceived notions that if it's not a beautiful young blonde white girl, it's not going to sell in terms of getting people to tune in? That's a hard thing to that's a very hard thing to overcome. And advertisers, I can tell you, because I worked with them for 20 years, they're a nervous lot. They want the status quo. They don't want to do anything, too different out there. We want things to stay just the way they are, the way they've always worked. And as long as you have that status quo mentality, how are you going to really make large systemic change? It's very difficult. That's why I so much applaud what my two co-panelists are doing here, because I really think the solution is at the grassroots level. I don't think it's trying to change the world, change the way the earth revolves. It's at the grassroots level, and the work that they and others and their colleagues are doing is, it brings tears to my eyes. It literally does. They're doing God's work, and I applaud them for it.
If you're going to find snakes, you got to be in the weeds. That's the whole thing. Often when I was working in management levels with NamUs, you would get criticized. You're in the weeds, and you're supposed to be at 30,000 feet, but you're going to find what you're looking for in the weeds sometimes. So I must say it's nice to be back in the weeds.
Jody, and I want to touch on this. I know we're running a little long, but I had to get this in. I know in terms of these story threads and selling them to news and how news kind of consumes them, I'm starting to see some criticisms pop up about MMIP cases being covered in more of a graphic nature. And I know there's one case in particular that you know about. I did coverage on my channel about it as well. That is Savannah Greywind. I just wanted to give you a moment to talk about that trend and the problem with the coverage being kind of laid out in that way.
Yeah, that's something that, again, goes back to colonization and how we, as the people, have been treated. That this violence leads to that disposability factor, leads to the fetishization of our people and our women, and that sexualization of our women. Is our reality, and it's painful to this day to know that we can go into museums, and that these museums have not only our ancestors but our relatives' bones and things that belong to us and things that are sacred. And these things are exploited on every level. Just because you're an academic doesn't mean you should have access to it. Or you should be able to share these photos or these sacred items. And our people are sacred in that same way. But it's not viewed that way. We've dealt with this violence. We've dealt with our missing people for generations. But then again, it was just sensationalized because it was so traumatic. Yeah. And Savannah, to me, she reminded me of all of the people that I went to college with. I went to a tribal college where everyone is American Indian. She was young. She was in college. Her partner was, they were just starting their life, and she had a baby. And the violence of taking a baby from a womb is, again, that violence that founded this country. Yeah. It's documented how babies were ripped from wombs, and to have this happen in present time, it was shocking how sensationalized and how the media shared that. And again, it got down to that. Why can't all of our people be covered like this, and not the gory details, and not, her baby is still here. And, it's a really hard reality that we have to deal with.
It is.
Yeah.
Could I jump in on that just quickly?
Please do.
It's what Jody is describing is so real. And yet, so much of this commodification of humanity, and I don't know what else to call it, is just taken for granted. The people who are appalled now that we want to change the Washington Redskins football team to something else. We want to change the Cleveland Indians, to something else. Imagine if there was a football team called the Atlanta Crackers or the Atlanta White Boys, or something like that. Would that have ever happened? It never would have happened. Of course not. Why? Because once again, it's so easy to commodify the other in our popular culture, in our expectations, and then all of that leads to, once again, the disposability factor, and that Jody so eloquently described. And it's it's at a systemic level. It's monolithic, and that's why, again, down in the weeds, the grassroots level, I think that's where the change is going to occur and is occurring. I mean, thanks to my co-panelists, the change is happening. Godspeed to that.
Yeah.
And also, you mentioned the mascots, and that's something that MMIW, MMIP groups always talk about, is how that feeds into how we're not people. Right. It feeds into our erasure, and that it's okay that we're not viewed as human, that we don't deserve all the help. We don't deserve all the coverage. We don't deserve the justice because we probably had something to do with why we're missing. That happens so often. That conversation is, what does it matter? It completely matters. It immensely matters to our existence. It directly affects our existence, and even today, just this morning, one of the first articles I seen on my social media was about the last Indians game. How it was a sad day at the stadium because it's the last, season they're going to have that mascot. There was a quote in that article. Somebody is like, when I hear Indians, I think of baseball, not Native Americans. And so that is why we have to understand, it directly affects our existence.
Yeah. And we have to not unplug ourselves from caring about others like that. I mean, it's like an impersonalization that's happening by creating a caricature and then just, it's the caricature. These are people. This is, and yeah, it's terrible. We've got one more clip prior to Gabby Petito's story. I think one of the biggest cases of this year had very similar elements, also possibly a domestic violence related case, and currently is actually running a news cycle using these kind of digestible news story threads that we've been touching on several times today to keep the coverage going. But it still has a family member that wishes for more exposure and more effort from law enforcement on all fronts.
Mary Chris Jolie. I'm the oldest siblings of my sister Maya Millete, who's been missing since January 8th. Well, actually, January 7th was the last time we heard anything from her.
Yeah, absolutely. And where did she go missing from?
She was last seen at her house. So that was, she was last seen at her house. And after that, we don't know.
And this is in Chula Vista, California.
Chula Vista.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I know some of the context around this conversation is obviously talking about Gabby's case. And a lot of us are concerned that there is a domestic violence component to Gabby's case. And in a very similar way with your sister's case, we're worried about that component as well, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So how would you describe the level of support that you've gotten from the media? And I know there's different levels. You've got, us guys in social media that are trying to help, but then you've got major media. How do you describe the experience you've been going through with them?
I think with my sister's case, I think we're lucky enough to be able to get, a good coverage, with the national and also, local, the national, and also the international, media level too. So I think we were fortunate enough to be able to do that. But not as much as, of course, with, the amount of support and, and level of coverage with Gabby.
I wish all these cases that we talked about on my channel got that level of support that Gabby's did, but I can understand why some people were feeling like, wow, like where was media and the law enforcement efforts? I mean, in Gabby's case, we have her being found in the middle of nowhere, basically. And with your sister, we've been looking for, 10 months at this point? Or
it's almost 9 months. Yeah. Again, different cases. Yeah, different cases, we can compare apples, to oranges, but you always kind of can't help comparing yourself to them too, that you wish you have that same amount of support.
Yeah.
But it's very hurtful to go back to that beginning of our case, that we never have any support at all, no urgency from the law enforcement. We didn't have that much, support from the public itself, even just the local, the community, and any organizations or any search and rescue organization. We never, at this point, we never really had any search and rescue operations that actually help us search for my sister. So, to think about that, it's really, really painful.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. And because of those challenges, it also kind of changed, I think, your approach. And I just want to also call out that you've been supported by your husband. You guys have been working on this on all fronts. But what I noticed through the media, and tell me if there's other pieces to this, is you kind of divided your efforts between trying to raise issues with law enforcement, where you would go and hold rallies in front of the police headquarters, and do your own search efforts.
Yeah. We did have, a good support also from, the local community. So, and also some of the, again, like the retired detective that we've been kind of working and supporting us, and he's been advising us, and he's been kind of like our advocate on how to to deal with the missing person. But we've been trying. I quit my job. I haven't been back to work since the day my sister went missing. So I'm doing this full time. I'm not sure if it made the difference for us in our case, because I continued to to rally for her, and to keep her name on the spotlight, and to keep the pressure from to the law enforcement. So I made sure this has been my full-time job to to keep on bringing awareness, and hopefully we'll bring her back home. But
well, and you've even upended more of your life than that, right? I mean, there's periods of time where you're basically living in a trailer as you're going from site to site as well.
Yeah, because we are an hour and a half away from we live an hour and a half away from Chula Vista. So yeah, I've been living in the campsite, so just sometimes by myself, and then on the weekend, then my husband comes and help me out. Yeah, we put our lives on hold for now, and I have a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, a daughter and a son, and they fully understand. And sometimes I feel bad too. I've been kind of like not disregarding them, but like just putting them on the side.
Well, and honestly, you're an example of one of the cases I see that's actually working right. Pulsive media has been consistent. You've got that kind of core group of supporters that are coming and helping you time and time again. Maybe let's flip the conversation to that side, looking at you guys as an example of all this stuff going right. Do you have someone that's contacting media? Is there a member of the family that's acting like a PR agent? Like, how does this work?
No. They actually contact us, like contact me. But then it's maybe because we constantly doing something, or like every week there's something going on, or sometimes, there's something in the case, like, like the family law, or, something out, they do search warrant here, or if something comes out with, with the gun violence kind of thing. And then, right. So, there's always constant update in our case. And then, so that's what I think keeping my sister's case up also in the media. So, like there's always been like up and down. There'll be like a couple weeks that's been quiet, and all of a sudden we have an update, then then the media will cover it again. So I'm sure you've seen, and I've seen that you were quoted in some articles kind of about this. There was a big rise in awareness around underrepresented cases, missing persons cases, over the past few weeks. Since that kind of spun up, have you seen any positive movement or change? Has there been a new focus? There's not much changed, as the last time, as evidence to what we had last weekend. We got, because sometimes like our team also goes, up and down. So at times we only have like about 15 people, like 10 to 15 people on the weekend search. But this weekend we have more people, like about 20 something people. But again, it's not much of a difference, as much as we wanted to, get more volunteers to come and help us. We didn't get that much of a difference.
I'll be honest with you. I was looking for some type of change too, because I've put out so much media on these cases. Everyone's talking about this. Are we finally going to get some attention to these types of cases as well? Nothing. It's just, It's exactly the same. So for all of the social media, get up on your soapbox, people yelling at each other through Twitter about, hey, do you care about these cases? When it comes down to it, there's information that's out there. And from what I'm seeing, no one is going to grab at it. No one is still reaching for that information.
No, unfortunately, that's what I've kind of noticed too. And is there any difference? It's like there's no difference. But if we probably can keep the conversation going, and if anything, if it makes any change at all, if we keep on going, I will definitely support that.
Is there anything that you're seeing in terms of Gabby's case that you think is a talking point for you to talk to the lieutenant about? Are you seeing any approaches or things that are happening with Gabby's case?
Well, just probably, the urgency. I think that's what my whole thing is, that if I could probably help out in a way that if law enforcement put more urgency to any missing person at all, I would hopefully be able to have that conversation with them, and who knows, it might have, it's going to change something, with that. I think that's the one that I really, really wanted to kind of push, with the law enforcement, that urgency, in the first couple of days or something, or just that show of support to the family. I think that's very important, to give them family support at all, because we never really got that at all from them at the beginning. Even the first, I would say, 2 months, we never really got that, show of support, that they're there, that they're doing their job, that they're looking for my sister. Only after we did that big noise and, the rally, that's when they start, actually putting more effort into my sister's case. I would say that, yeah.
Yeah. What do you want the world to know about your sister?
She's a loving mom, and she's a loving sister, very smart, and I don't think she'll ever abandon her family at all. She's fun loving. She loves the outdoors. She's always going out, and she enjoys life itself. We have so much fun together, and we miss her a lot, but we just want to bring her home to her children. Hopefully we'll have closure soon.
So very touching information from Mary Chris there on her sister, Mae Millete. And I think urgency was a key word that she kept bringing up with these cases, and she wants law enforcement to be more urgent about responding to them. We've got this awareness now. We're having these conversations. People are talking about this. Is it going to lead to a sustained change or effort? Mary Chris seems to think there's some good changes coming, and the vibe I'm getting from you guys too, I think, as Todd would phrase it, the seeds are being planted, but we have to keep watering them. What can we do to help support a sustained focus and change here? Let's start with you, Dr. Bonn.
I think we need to continue to have these kind of conversations. If we can't have them on an ongoing basis in the sort of traditional major, media, the NBCs, the CBSs, the ABCs, then let's have them here, because again, this is where the change is gonna come. And let's keep it going. Let's keep the dialogue going, and because things do take root and they grow. And I think when the the powers that be, at the major broadcast networks, when they see that there's something really happening here, that the change is coming, then they will want to pick up on it, because guess what? It's newsworthy even within their framework. So we just need to keep doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. Jody?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like the conversations need to happen, because the conversations that happen lead to action. It's like with the work that we do with MMIW, we've been talking about it for years now. I was feeling, personally, I felt like we kind of plateaued for a moment when it was just raising awareness, we deal with that education exhaustion. We can't just bring up this crisis and not bring up all of our history, to catch people up to speed. And that's something that makes it not so palatable, like you have to educate on this long history to get to the crisis. And I think that's something that we dealt with for a few years, dealing with this and just raising awareness. And now we're at that point where we're beyond raising the awareness. And now we're at that action point where people are kind of willing to, what can I do? And not just by, send me your GoFundMe, send me your Venmo. Like, they're not just throwing money at it now. Now they're looking deeper and they're seeing the need, and they're seeing that, law enforcement or tribal PD, FBI, they're not always out in the weeds searching for people, like literally. There are plenty of organizations in Oklahoma that we work in coalition with that, they have to go and plan and do these searches, and and now they're having people that want to help and help them make it better and do it better. And we're in that point where it's that solidarity is coming to action. It's not just, this sad story, this family is missing their relative. It's more like, this is in my backyard. I've kind of helped keep this going. I haven't talked about it. I haven't shared this flyer. It doesn't have to be, I'm a white person, I'm an American Indian person, I have to share flyers of my people. It's everybody. And it's at that point where everybody is seeing that and they're comfortable with doing that more. And it's sustaining these conversations. These very important conversations are getting to places that they haven't been before at all. I have, one of our members in MMIW Texas Rematriate is a professor at a university here. And we're on that campus doing all kinds of work, educating people that we would not have ever had the chance to do a few years ago. It would not have happened. We are being viewed as an expert on something. And it's not just in that academic world. It's like, we can refer to Todd as an expert of doing this work, and it's finally like, there's a legitimized our work in this way just recently with the little bit of coverage that has changed.
Yeah. Well, that certainly gives me a lot of hope for the future, hearing you talk like that as well. Todd, how about it? How do we keep this sustained and keep it rolling?
A lot of it's going to be easy. If you don't like what's for supper, change the menu. I'm being funny. I try to use humor to make people at least smile for just a minute. But we understand how news media works. We understand that there's a demographic. We understand they're selling stories and they're a business. How about when somebody asks me, how can I help? I say, can you share this story? All the stories. You change what they realize that they're going to have to cater to. If we tell them this is what we want to read, there will be more of them. Promise you that. And it's asking people that normally they might read it or check it on Facebook, but no, really share it. Do you know anybody that lives in the area where this person was at? Share it with them so that link will be demonstrated to social media. Somebody read it and shared it. That's the biggest way to get their attention is what's selling. So, and I think that's really important. And we remember that. We all are smart enough to know that. Why not make lemonade out of these lemons? If we don't like the way the news coverage is covering it, there's one good way to change it. One. And that's to make sure we show a priority to this. Share them more than you would anything else. I'm not talking about spamming people, but making sure people read that story. This is important when you take a look at it, person to person. Use every link. Share it to your Twitter feed. Just make sure those stories stay out there and they stay alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we framed a lot of the conversation around Gabby's case and there's one other person that's looking for real sustained change on this too, Gabby Petito's father. And I just want to share this clip of him.
I don't want to dismiss the ridiculously hard work that the FBI and law enforcement all around did, but social media has been amazing and very influential. And to be honest, it should continue for other people too. This same type of heightened awareness should be continued for everyone. And that goes for you all too.
Well, I don't think I could have said that better myself. Yeah, we got a thumbs up from everyone on that, I think. I want to give a huge, big thank you to Seraphine, Michelle, and Mary Chris for sharing their stories with us here. You'll also find links to the episodes that I've done on those individual stories in the description box down below. Down there, you're also going to find links for more information about each of today's panel experts. And I have to tell you guys, I'm extremely proud of what we've done here today. A big thank you, Jody, voice Yellowfish, Dr. Scott Bonn, and of course, Todd Matthews. Most of all, and I think they've made this very clear, I need to thank you. Because if you cared enough to get into this conversation, to listen to these opinions, maybe learn something new or get a different perspective, then you're part of the change that we're looking to help affect with this. So a big thank you to you as well. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Join me again soon, right back here on the Lord and Arts channel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.